So over here, this is of course a continuation of the Puritans. So point B here. So while you guys are finishing copying this information down, we'll kind of do a little bit of a recap here. I think everybody probably remembers from middle school history class that our very first settlement in America was called Jamestown, right? And it was led by John Smith coming over from England with a group of explorers called the Virginia Company. And Virginia Company was the settlers who originally built Jamestown, and then who also started the tobacco industry in Jamestown. And that was what really saved that colony, because they had a lot of trouble at first. They fell into a lot of diseases when they first arrived, excuse me. And then a lot of the colonists were pretty greedy from the get-go, and they didn't want to wait to get paid for their work. They expected to get a fast return from their crops, and obviously crops take a long time to grow. So when they didn't get their money, they refused to work, and so they had a labor shortage there for a while. So John Smith and the other leaders were sort of able to save them by coming up with this tobacco idea, and then tobacco became a really great product for England to purchase from here because they didn't have it over there. And so that's what saved that colony, and then they were able to expand. Okay, so what happens is now during this time in the 1600s, we're starting to have other English and European colonies pop up, including Virginia. Virginia was the very first one. Yeah, Aaron?
What made tobacco so special back then?
Tobacco. Okay, well, what did people use tobacco for? What's the main reason that we even produced tobacco? Yeah, for smoking. So that was considered to be a luxury, right? And if tobacco didn't grow over in Europe, that meant that before they had easy access to it here in America, they would have had to purchase tobacco from other parts of the world, and it was probably more expensive and more difficult to get. And as you guys know, people love to smoke, right? And obviously back then they didn't realize it was bad for you. Okay, they just knew that it made them feel good, or it was a nervous habit, or what have you. Kind of a leisurely pastime back then, because there wasn't, a lot else to do, right? They couldn't sit down and watch TV, so smoking was something fun for people to do. So that's why it became such a hot commodity, when they started producing it in America. And of course, even though we have these colonies over in America, they're still under the rule of England. So England is controlling everything. So really, the product belongs to England at this time. So they can do whatever they want with it. That's a good question, Aaron. Okay, so in Virginia, what happens is with each of the colonies, right, we have Virginia is the first one, we have New York, Pennsylvania that start popping up all over here on the east coast of the United States, okay, the one that's obviously closest to Europe. And each of the little colonies has its own government. They elect a governor, and then the governor has a little council. But the governor didn't always help out his workers. And so what happened was that we have what's called Bacon's Rebellion, if you remember hearing about that. This is where local farmers in Virginia started rebelling against their government because they weren't getting any help to ward off Native Americans. They weren't getting the money that they were owed, so they rebelled, and unfortunately they failed. But the nice thing about Bacon's Rebellion is that it sort of sparked this idea that the people were the ones that would help to create the government eventually, right? They saw a lot of flaws in their current government system. They didn't want to be just ruled by one person making all of the decisions all the time because it wasn't fair to them. So the rebellion sparked this model of democracy that we use later on in America. And we kind of already talked about the Puritan group, so I'll move on from there. The Puritans' main colony was called Massachusetts Bay Colony. So again, Massachusetts, of course, is one of our current states over on the East Coast. Their main leader was John Winthrop, and he did a really nice job with this colony because he was very skilled himself. They had a great plan mapped out before they came over from Europe, which a lot of the other colonists didn't, and that's why they failed. They were expecting to be able to do certain things, and then they realized that they couldn't. It wasn't realistic. But he did a really great job as a leader. This colony, the success of this colony then brought over all of these other Europeans then. And this was called the Great Migration. 20,000 Europeans, specifically English people, came over, wanted to get a part of the new land and be a part of this, these really powerful colonies. Okay, and then the city of Boston became like the center, the capital of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Anybody ever been to Boston before? Neither have I. I've always wanted to go. It's a very supposedly very beautiful historical city. Always lots going on there. So that's good. Let's see here. Okay. So going along with the Puritans, I didn't write this, well, I have it here in my notes, but I just have that they were a very strict moral society. They believed that everybody should follow their way of living and their beliefs. So we talked about how this was kind of ironic because that's what they were trying to escape in Europe, right? Religious oppression, and then they were in turn oppressing others once they got to America. So the Puritan Church was the group that really dominated their original colonies. And so because they wouldn't allow anybody to break off from their beliefs, then as a result we had a couple of main people who decided to break off from the Puritan group. And so we talked about who those people were. I'll just kind of put up here, we had Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson. So Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson both made it kind of their life's mission to promote a couple of different ideas. The first one is that they wanted to promote separation of church and state, which obviously the Puritans were not doing. Okay, what does the separation of church and state mean? We currently have that in our government here in the United States. Holly?
Like the church doesn't affect what happens like politically or in the governmental system.
Yeah, so religion is not part of the government. Religion is not governing us, right? because obviously here in America, we have the right to practice or not practice any religion that we choose. Okay, so religion and government are totally separate. And every once in a while we see some crossover with various things, and that's just natural. Okay, good. The other main thing that they believed, so they wanted to stress, then as a result, religious freedom. And then another point here, they talk about King Philip's War. And sometimes the name of this war stumps people, because who was King Philip? He wasn't an English king like the name suggests. Who was he, Paige?
He was a Native American chief.
Yeah. Okay, he was such a successful leader, though, that the colonists gave him the nickname of King Philip, because he reminded them of some of their kings over in England. So what happened was that this was one of the major Native American rebellions against the colonists. And the Native American groups, actually, they did succeed in taking down a lot of colonists and destroying some of the colonist structures. However, they did not win this war. And so again, that's going to be a pattern that we see throughout the rest of American history. The Native Americans will at times try to cooperate with colonists and vice versa. At times they will try to rebel, and usually they were squashed. Usually they did not succeed. Okay. Okay, just a couple of quick notes about the middle colonies. Okay, so we have the English who are taking over most of the colonies here, and eventually the English will rule over all of the 13 original colonies. But initially, it was the Dutch who settled New York, what is present-day New York, and the Dutch were very religiously tolerant. And for that reason, a lot of different religious groups felt safe settling in this area. So you had Jewish people coming over, you had Catholic groups coming over and settling, you had people of various races settling in this area, and they were given many more freedoms than were the people settling in the Puritan colonies. Okay, another religious group at the time, and Quakers are still around today, Quakers settled in what is current-day Pennsylvania, and their major leader was a man named William Penn, after whom the state of Pennsylvania was named. Okay, and same thing, William Penn was a leader who believed in giving all humans a sense of equality. He did a much better job of allowing the Native Americans to still hold some claims to their land, and he really stressed the importance of using the Native Americans to learn from and to trade with. So we'll put here fair treatment of natives. So at the end of this section, it's talking about how England gains control over all 13 of the colonies with something that were called the Navigation Acts. Navigation Acts came directly from England, and basically the Navigation Acts just made it so that any of the goods and exports that were coming out of America directly benefited England. They could only send goods through English ports first before selling to any other countries. So basically it was great for England and then bad for all of the other European powers. So that's why England gained control over this whole area and would have control for a long time. Let's see here. I think that's all we need to put actually about that. So Navigation Acts, that was one of your terms that you had to define. So we'll go ahead and stop there then. Are there any questions? Okay, good. Okay, so the only thing that you need to worry about for tomorrow is just your states quiz. Okay, so no other homework besides that.